Hi there, my name's Bekkytt, and I have a problem. In a few short months, I'm going to be shipping off to my master's program somewhere around the world, which means for the next 2.5 years, I need to live entirely out of 2 suitcases and a backpack. Now, I can always take less clothes, but I'm really struggling to figure out how to take my entire desktop PC. I don't want to use a laptop or Mac Mini, because I'm a masochist and I can't do anything the easy way. So, the only solution left is to simply take my current computer and make it as small as possible. Normally, when dealing with computers, and really anything you buy, it's important to compare price to performance. But in this case, we also need to compare the size of the computer and the efficiency, because we don't want it to explode. So the question is, which case maximizes on these 4 principles? Introducing the Velka 3. AKA the world's most expensive lunchbox. This little guy is less than 4 liters in volume, and I can still cram an entire month's rent worth of crap inside. So consider subscribing so I can justify this as a business expense, and we can keep fitting this TSA agent's worst nightmare into smaller and smaller boxes. We're going to start off this build with the ASRock B850 Lightning, a quote-unquote budget ITX motherboard that still has enough bells and whistles to justify its price. We'll be pairing this with the Ryzen 7 9700X, a powerful little CPU with a 65-watt TDP, and most importantly, came with a copy of Monster Hunter Wilds. My brother dropped this CPU earlier this month, so hopefully everything is seated correctly, or it won't be the only thing that gets dropped. Moving on to the RAM, we have 32 gigs of Corsair Vengeance DDR5 at 6000 MHz. I always have to press harder than I expect on RAM, and this time was no exception. One of the RAM sticks just would not click, and I was paranoid I was going to break it as I kept reseating it again and again. But eventually everything came into place, and nothing cracked. I think. On to the storage. I'm going to be reusing my 1TB 970 EVO Plus M.2 SSD from my old computer as my boot drive, and adding a 2TB 990 EVO Plus for all of my larger files like games. I also have a 4TB external SSD for all the video files that go into YouTube videos like these. After applying the thermal paste, like how God intended, it was time to put on the CPU cooler. We've only got 37mm of clearance, so I went with the Noctua NHL9A. This was the first real nerve-wracking part of the build, because the cooler just sits on top of the CPU until you can screw it in from the back, threatening to smear the thick thermal paste all over if you mess up. But once we've got that tightened, we're pretty much done with the computer itself, and we can move on to the case. This is why, if you're thinking of building in the Velka 3, I would recommend labeling everything. We start with installing the motherboard onto the mounting plate, and then attaching the riser cable. Now, this little guy needs to be bent back more than you would expect, but don't worry, he's flexible. After screwing him down, we can finally install the graphics card. We're going to be using the single-fan Zotac 4060 Solo. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why even bother with a 4060 in the first place? Well, remember, we're building a computer that's smaller than some graphics cards by themselves, so size matters, and we want them small. There's maybe 5 modern graphics cards that can fit in this case, and none of them are in stock. At least, not at same prices.
Oh, hell no, man, what the fuck?
I was lucky enough to find this 4060 near MSRP at $309, and that was the most I was willing to spend. Furthermore, the 4060 is uniquely suited for super small form factors, because it only has a TDP of 115 watts, making it super efficient. I could upgrade to the 5060 in the future, but that has a TDP of 145 watts. And with the current pricing of components, I'm not looking to spend twice as much to turn my lunchbox into a Now that the core of the computer is done, we just have to carefully slide it into the case frame. Emphasis on careful. I think I scraped a power supply every time I tried seating it in, and the rear I/O does not make that easy. Also, make sure to plug in the GPU power cable first, or you'll be like me and spend the next hour trying to finagle it in, instead of just admitting your mistake and taking it out. Once that's done, we can plug in all the other cables and do a quick boot test. Let's go, motherfucker! Fuck you! And now we get to the really annoying part of this build. Cable management. With how small this case is, you need a special Flex ATX power supply, and the one that Velka sells is not modular. In practice, there's only an extra 8-pin and SATA cable that I didn't use, and not having it be modular probably saves on space and money, but we still have to be creative with our routing. Here, for example, I realized none of the cables could go over these long standoffs, and there wasn't enough room to squeeze them under, so I had to take it apart and start over. Here's how to cut open your hand and your computer. I realized the motherboard cable was too thick when it was tied together to screw the front panel on, so I had to cut off this zip tie to flatten it out. Screwing in the side panels, I noticed what I can only imagine is a typo in the manual. It recommends using these 6mm round head screws for the bottom back, but I was stripping out the hole on the left side. The case came built with this random long screw and nut that had no documentation, but it was a perfect fit, so I just used that instead. Finally, we install the front panel, sealing everything inside, never to be opened again. And that's it, our tiny lunchbox computer. Here's my cat for a size comparison. And here she is, using the motherboard box as her new house. This little guy is pretty impressive. I threw every stock stress test in OCCT at it at once, and the CPU never hit 90 degrees, and the GPU never even hit 50. The only annoying thing was the but I'm sure that'll be easy to fix. So that was a fucking lie. Let me tell you, fan curves do nothing when you only have one fan. If I make the fan slower, the temperature increases until the fan kicks in anyway. But if I keep the fan at a static RPM, the CPU overheats and throttles. I'm in a computer catch-22 of my own creation. My only hope was to lower the power the CPU needed so it produced less heat overall. I had no other choice. I had to go to the forbidden texts. And it drove me mad. TJ Maxx, PPT, TCTL over TDI. I had to download more random programs from sketchy Reddit links than ever before. And the worst part is, no matter what I did, my temps were still up and my fan sounded like it wanted to take off and fly into a building. I give up. My use case is so specific that the tuning just doesn't exist. This was a complete waste of... Wait, are those presets? And just like that, our little lunchbox is done. With a negative 30 millivolt undervolt and a thermal limit of 75 degrees, I threw Cinebench at it to see if it would explode. Benchmark scores and clock speeds are comparable, ever so slightly in favor of the undervolt. Power draw is down by 15%, and temps are down by about 9%. But most importantly, fan speeds are down by almost 30%, meaning video games are going to go from this to this. But at the end of the day, what really matters most is getting 1000 FPS in Minecraft.